ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरून् श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त काञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So we will continue from where we left, this seventh sloka of the seventh chapter of second canto. कामं दहन्ति कृतिनो ननुरोष दृष्ट्या रोषं दहन्तम् उतथेन दहन्तः असह्यं सोऽयं यदन्तरं अलं प्रविशन् बिभेति कामं कथं नु पुनरस्य मनश्रयेत. Great stalwarts like Lord Shiva can by their wrathful glances overcome lust and vanquish him, yet they cannot be free from the overwhelming effect of their own wrath. Such wrath can never enter into the heart of him, the Lord, who is above all this. So how can lust take shelter in his mind? Purport. When Lord Shiva, okay, so this just before this we were discussing about the Naranarayan Rishi, like the different incarnations are being explained, and Naranarayan Rishi was the Cupid, tried to allure him, like by sending some beautiful women. But then the Naranarayan Rishi, they produced so many more beautiful women from their own body, so that the Cupid was completely defeated. So now in this sloka is supporting or in going in that line, same lines it is mentioning. So let's see the purport. When Lord Shiva was engaged in severely austere meditation, Cupid, the demigod of lust, threw his arrow of sex desire. Lord Shiva, thus being angry at him, glanced Cupid in great wrath, and at once the body of Cupid was annihilated. Although Lord Shiva was so powerful, he was unable to get free from the effects of such wrath. But in the behavior of Lord Vishnu, there is no incident of such wrath at any time. On the contrary, Bhrigu Muni tested the tolerance of Lord by purposely kicking his chest, but instead of being angry at Bhrigu Muni, the Lord begged his pardon, saying that Bhrigu Muni's leg might have been badly hurt because his chest is too hard. The Lord has the sign of the foot of Bhrigu as the mark of tolerance. The Lord, therefore, is never affected by any kind of wrath. So how can there be any place for lust, which is less stronger than wrath? When the lust or desire is not fulfilled, there is the appearance of wrath. But in the absence of wrath, how can there be any place for lust? The Lord is known as Aptakama, or one who can fulfill his desires by himself. He does not require anyone's help to satisfy his desires. The Lord is unlimited, and therefore his desires are also unlimited. All living entities but the Lord are limited in every respect. How then can the limited satisfy the desires of the unlimited? The conclusion is that the absolute personality of Godhead has neither lust nor anger, and even if there is sometimes a show of lust and anger by the absolute, it should be considered an absolute benediction. Okay, so this, we can see that in Krishna Lila, there are so many cases where the Lord seems to be like having lustful feelings or anger, towards the opponent party and things like that. But it is never the Lord is never overcome by that. No, on the contrary, the lust and anger and things like that, which we talk about, which is within the three modes of material nature, and we have studied that the Lord is a master of three modes of material nature, and he can never come under the control of three modes of material nature. Right? So, text 8. विद्धः सपत्न उदित प्रतिभिर अंतिराज्ञो बालोऽपि सन् उपगतस्तपसेवनानि तस्मा तस्मा अदाद् ध्रुवगतिं गृणते प्रसन्नो दिव्यास्तुवन्ति मुनयो यद् उपर्यदष्टात्. Being insulted by sharp words spoken by the co-wife of the king, even in his presence, Prince Dhruva, though only a boy, took to severe penances in the forest, and the Lord, being satisfied by his prayers, awarded him the Dhruva planet, which is worshipped by great sages, both upward and downward. Purport. When he was only 5 years old, Prince Dhruva, a great devotee and the son of Maharaj Uttanapad, was sitting on the lap of his father. His stepmother did not like the king's patting her stepson, so she dragged him out, saying that he could not claim to sit on the lap of the king because he was not born of her womb. The little boy felt insulted by this act of his stepmother, nor did his father make any protest, for he was too attached to his second wife. After this incident, Prince Dhruva went to his own mother and complained. His real mother also could not take any step against this insulting behavior, and so she wept. The boy inquired from his mother how he could sit on the royal throne of his father, and the poor queen replied that only the Lord could help him. The boy inquired where the Lord could be seen, and the queen replied that it is said that the Lord is sometimes seen by great sages in the dense forest. The child prince decided to go into the forest to perform severe penances in order to achieve his objective. Prince Dhruva performed a stringent type of penance under the instruction of his spiritual master Sri Narada Muni, who was specifically deputed for this purpose by the personality of Godhead. Prince Dhruva was initiated by Narada into chanting the hymn composing of 18 letters, namely Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and Lord Vasudev incarnated himself as Krishnigarbha, the personality of Godhead, with 4 hands, and awarded the prince a specific planet above the 7 stars. Prince Dhruva, after achieving success in his undertakings, saw the Lord face to face, and he was satisfied that all his needs were fulfilled. Right? So we had sometimes discussed this sloka, like where Dhruva Maharaj is offering his gratitude to the Lord. So where he says that sthana bilashis tapasistitoham tvam praptavan deva munindra guhyam kanchan vichinvan abhidivya ratnam swamin kritartosmi varam nayache. Right? So he says that I came to approach the Lord with the desire of getting a huge kingdom, sthana abhilashi. I had the desire to get a huge kingdom, and then tapasi stitoham. So I was situated on the tapasya, and then but rather what did I get? Tvam praptavan. So he's addressing to the Supreme Lord. He's telling that so I wanted a land, I wanted a huge kingdom, but then I got you. And like how great this gift, no Deva Munindra Guhyam. So for even great personalities like the Devas, Munis, and all these people, so the Lord is Guhyam. Lord is very secretive, very, very secret. Even for them, it is not possible for even for them to attain the Lord. But then, Dhruva Maharaj attained him. And then, what is it? Kanchan Vichinvan Api Divya Ratnam. So I was looking for some broken pieces of glasses, but then I got Divya Ratnam. I got this precious gem of your darshan, right? So this is how Dhruva actually mentions. And what is he comparing to the broken pieces of glasses? His material ambition, his ambition of getting a big kingdom, that he is comparing to broken pieces of glasses. And then he's saying that the darshan of the Lord to be the Divya Ratnam. And then Dhruva is telling that Swamin Kritartoham. I am very, very grateful to you for giving such a great gift to me. No, I'm very, very grateful to you. No, varam nayache. I don't want any other benediction. No, I came here for asking for a big land, but then I don't want anything now. No, I am completely satisfied. So this is what he actually tells the this one tells to the Lord, and that was the experience of Dhruva Maharaj. And here, the Lord's one of the incarnations of the Lord, known as Prishnigarbha, is mentioned. So Prishnigarbha, he appeared, and then he blessed Dhruva Maharaj. Though he didn't ask for any bigger kingdom now, but his desire was there before. So the Lord fulfilled, by giving the Dhruva Loka or Dhruva Nakshatra for him, like. In that way, like Dhruva Maharaj also got the darshan of the Lord, and he also got his desires fulfilled. Okay, let's continue the purport. The planet awarded to Prince Dhruva Maharaj is a fixed Vaikuntha planet installed in the material atmosphere by the will of the Supreme Lord Vasudev. This planet, although within the material world, will not be annihilated at the time of devastation, but will remain fixed in its place. And because it is a Vaikuntha planet, never to be annihilated, it is worshipped even by the denizens of the 7 stars situated below the Dhruva planet, as well as by the planets which are even above the Dhruva planet. Maharishi Bhrugu's planet is situated above the Dhruva planet. So here the 7 stars is like the Saptarishi Loka. So like we have Bharadwaja, we generally have the Gotras, right? So this is from this 7 rishis. So that's where the like Gotras of the people actually come in. So they are the progenitors of the human race. So this Saptarishi Loka is there, and above that is Dhruva Loka, right? So okay. So the Lord incarnated himself as Prishnigarbha just to satisfy a pure devotee of the Lord. And Prince Dhruva achieved this perfection simply by chanting the hymn mentioned above after being initiated by another pure devotee, Narada. A serious personality can thus achieve the highest perfection of meeting the Lord and his objective simply by being guided by a pure devotee who automatically approaches by dint of one's serious determination to meet the Lord by all means. The description of Prince Dhruva's activities can be read in detail in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is in great detail, it is mentioned. So here it is not just any mantra, like we can just chant like that and get some perfection. So it has to be offered by a pure devotee of the Lord, and a due initiation has to be done. So that is when it will have its full potency, right? So that's one point here. Text 9. Yadvenam utpatagatam dvijavakya vajra nishplushta purusha bhagam niraya patantam tratvartitho jagati putrapadam chalebe dugda vasuni vasuda sakalani yena. Maharaj Vena went astray from the path of righteousness, and the Brahmanas chastised him by thunderbolt curse. By this, King Vena was burnt with his good deeds and opulence and was en route to hell. The Lord, by his causeless mercy, descended as his son by the name of Prithu, delivered the condemned King Vena from hell, and exploited the earth by drawing all kinds of crops as produce. So this is another pastime, like the Lord appears as a Shaktivesh avatar as Prithu Maharaj. So Vena was a king. He is son of Maharaj Anga, and then he was doing so much of atrocious activities. So all the Brahmanas got together, and then they killed Vena. They cursed Vena to death, and they saw that there was no king over there. So then they churned the body of King Vena, and then the Supreme Lord in the form of Maharaj Prithu appeared from the body of Vena. So that is why he is called as son of Vena. So this Prithu Maharaj is a Sakyavesh avatar of the Lord. Yesterday we discussed these aspects, different kinds of avatar. So Sakyavesh avatar means a living entity who is specifically empowered with the power of the Supreme Lord. So Prithu Maharaj is a Sakyavesh avatar, wherein he is specifically empowered with the power of ruling the earth. And then because of King Vena, he was so atrocious and sinful Mother Earth had stopped producing all kinds of foodstuffs and all kinds of natural resources. Once the sinful activities increase in the surface of the earth, then naturally the natural resources decline. And when Prithu Maharaj took charge as the king, he saw that no, people are completely emaciated. No, there is no natural resources available. There is no food grains available. So then immediately he made arrangement in such a way that he actually extracted all the natural resources from the earth. So earth had actually kept it hidden. So then he extracted everything from the earth, and for the well-being of the people. So here also Srila Prabhupada in this section, it's this pastime also comes in the fourth canto of Bhagavatam. So there Prabhupada mentions that an expert administrative head, an expert ruler, should be capable enough to extract the natural resources from the earth and to supply for the people in general. So otherwise, if the person is sinful, so then the earth will slowly retract all the natural resources, right? So by encouraging the pious activities, by encouraging punya karma, so then the earth will start producing wonderful things. Okay. Purport. According to the system of Varnashram Dharma, the pious and learned Brahmanas were the natural guardians of the society. The Brahmanas, by their learned labor of love, would instruct the administrator kings how to rule the country in complete righteousness, and thus the process would go on as perfect welfare state. The kings or the Kshatriya administrators would always consult the council of learned Brahmanas. They were never autocratic monarchs. The scriptures like Manu Samhita and other authorized books of the great sages were guiding principles for ruling subjects, and there was no need for less intelligent persons to manufacture a code of law in the name of democracy. The less intelligent mass of people have very little knowledge of their own welfare, as a child has very little knowledge of its future well-being. The experienced father guides the innocent child towards the path of progress, and the childlike mass of people need similar guidance. The standard welfare codes are already there in the Manu Samhita and other Vedic literatures. The learned Brahmanas would advise the king in terms of those standard books of knowledge and with reference to the particular situation of time and place. Such Brahmanas were not paid servants of the king, and therefore they had the strength to dictate the king on the principles of the scriptures. So this is a very important thing. Yeah, let's finish the next statement also. This system continued even up to the time of Maharaj Chandragupta, and the Brahmana Chanakya was his unpaid prime minister. So this is a very important principle. The Brahmanas would never be purchased by the kings. Brahmanas are the advisors of the king, but then they can never be purchased. Brahmanas can they, in fact, they are the masters. They would dictate what needs to be done, but then they would not take charge of things like as the king is doing. They would just say from the authorized scriptures what is need to be done, and the kings would just simply follow them. That is how they are. And they used to maintain themselves in a very poor condition. Even if they used to get a lot of charity, they would give it off in the very same day. They would not keep anything for the next day, right? So that is how the Brahmanas were. And many times like kings had tried to keep the Brahmanas with them, by paying them or by giving them some facility and things like that. The Brahmanas would never accept. They would accept charity, but then they would give it off also back in charity, like within a short while. So that is how the Brahmanas used to be. And because they didn't have any material possessions, and they didn't have they are not obliged to the king in such a way that if I tell something, whether the king will think bad or not. So they would not have any such anxiety or thought and things like that. They would just simply speak the truth, and kings would appreciate that. And here in this case, Maharaj Vena did not adhere. And look, okay, let's see in the purport further. Maharaj Vena did not adhere to the principles of ruling, and he disobeyed the learned Brahmanas. The broad-minded Brahmanas were not self-interested, but looked to the interest of the complete welfare of all the subjects. They wanted to chastise King Vena for his misconduct, and so prayed to the Almighty Lord as well as cursed the king. Long life, obedience, good education, sorry, good reputation, righteousness, prospects of being promoted to higher planets, and blessings of great personalities are all vanquished simply by disobedience to a great soul. One should strictly try to follow in the footsteps of great souls, right? Here we see that no, the Brahmanas had advised King Vena how to rule, but then King Vena disobeyed, and because of that disobedience, no, all his long life, no righteousness and good, no his power and like as a king of the world and things like that, everything got finished in one moment. So that's why no, we should never disobey a great soul. No, we should always follow in their footsteps, right? One should strictly try to follow in the footsteps of great souls. Maharaj Vena became a king undoubtedly due to his past deeds of righteousness, but because he willfully neglected the great souls, he was punished by the loss of all the above mentioned acquisitions. In the Vamana Purana, the history of Maharaj Vena and his degradation are fully described. When Maharaj Prithu heard about the hellish condition of his father Vena, who was suffering from leprosy in the family of a Mlecha, he at once brought the former king to Kurukshetra for his purification and relieved him of all sufferings. So this is the name of this. This is why a son is called Putra. Putra means no, like one who is deliverer of his father. No, like a person, a son who can deliver his father from all sinful reactions is called Putra. So here, Prithu Maharaj is a very wonderful Putra, and he is seeing that his father had committed a lot of sinful actions, and he's been awarded a very hellish condition because of his sinful action. And Prithu Maharaj actually brought him back, and then he purified him of all the sufferings, right? So this is how people actually should beget children, and train them nicely, in the Vedic system. So the what is the incentive? They can actually save one from the like entrance into hellish planets, right? So Maharaj Prithu, the incarnation of God, descended by the prayer of Brahmanas to rectify the disorders on earth. He produced all kinds of crops, but at the same time, he performed the duty of a son who delivers his father from hellish conditions. The word Putra means one who delivers from hell, and hell called Put. That is a worthy son. Okay, so text 10. Nabe rasha vrishab asha sudevi sunur yo vai chachara samadrig jada yoga charyam yat paramahamsam rashaya padam amananti swastha prashanta karanah parimukta sangah. The Lord appeared as the son of Sudevi, the wife of King Nabi, and was known as Rishabhadev. He performed materialistic yoga to equibalance the mind. This stage is also accepted as the highest perfectional situation of liberation, wherein one is situated in oneself and is completely satisfied. So this is Maharaj Rishabhadev. So he had 100 sons. In the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, we study about Rishabhadev. So all these incarnations now in one slokas it is going on. So in further cantos it will all be described in detail actually. So Maharaj Rishabhadev, he had 100 sons, and one of the sons of Maharaj Rishabhadev is the Bharat Maharaj, right? So and from this one, the whole land is called as the Bharatvarsha, right? Okay, so purport. Out of many types of mystic performances of self-realization, the process of Jada Yoga is also one accepted by authorities. The Jada Yoga involves practicing becoming like a dumb stone and not being affected by material reactions. Just as a stone is indifferent to all kinds of attacks and re-attacks of external situation, similarly, one practices Jada Yoga by tolerating voluntarily infliction of pain upon the material body. Such yogis, out of many self infliction methods, practice plucking out the hairs on their head without shaving and without any instrumental help. But the real purpose of Jada Yoga practice is to get free from all material affection and to be completely situated in the self. So this plucking of hairs and things like that, these days we can see there are people who practice like that, but then that is not recommended. Like what Rishabhadev was performing was, he just became like a dumb man, and then he just tolerated all the insults, whatever came. And sometimes people made fun of him, sometimes people threw some obnoxious things at him, and then so many things were happening around him, but he was just tolerating everything. That is also one of the yoga processes, and that is generally not recommended for the sadhakas. So but then this is like Lord appears in different incarnations, and then he practically demonstrates different kinds of practices that are there. So and here there's a very this Jada yoga process is very, very difficult to perform. But then now in the modern day, like people who practice these things, they invent their own ways of doing it, like this, forcefully plucking their own hairs from the body and things like that and all. So no, it is not that you have to inflict pain on your body. Whatever pain naturally it comes, no one has to tolerate. So no, there is always a deviation. These kind of deviations happen because of they are not solidly situated on the scriptures. They don't know what is exactly mentioned in the scriptures. They invent some things new, and then the moment we invent something new, then we are not guaranteed of success, right? So if we follow the map or path given by the Supreme Lord in the scriptures, we can be assured of the destination which is promised by the Lord. But then if we make our own path, then there is no guarantee of success. There is nobody can say like where we will end up in the end. Okay. Okay, at the last stage of his life, Emperor Rishabhadev wandered like a dumb madman, unaffected by all kinds of bodily mistreatment. Seeing him like a madman, wandering naked with long hair and a long beard, less intelligent children and men in the street used to spit on him and urinate on his body. He used to lie in his own stool and never move, but the stool of his body was fragrant like the smell of fragrant flowers. And a saintly person would recognize him as a Paramahamsa, one in the highest state of human perfection. One who is not able to make his stool fragrant should not, however, imitate Emperor Rishabhadev. The practice of Jada Yoga was possible for Rishabhadev and others on the same level of perfection, but such an uncommon practice is impossible for an ordinary man. So generally, like Jain sadhus, like sometimes they practice this kind of this one. But then it is here Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that one of the sign of that perfection is that even that excreta from their body used to smell like fragrant flower. So that means like they have completely purified. They are not there in the bodily existence. They are completely purified, and such people can take up this process, but not any ordinary common man. Okay? So the real purpose of Jada Yoga, as mentioned here in this verse, is prashanta karanaha, or subduing the senses. Shanta means like to completely make peaceful, and karana means the senses. Like prashanta karanaha means like to completely all the yoga process. Be it Ashtanga yoga, be it Jnana yoga, be it Karma yoga, whatever may be the process. So the process is aiming at bringing the senses under control. Like the senses are completely going wild on the sense gratification, material sense gratification, and to make these senses completely under control, subduing the senses, as Prabhupada is writing here. That's the purpose of yoga, right? So, okay, the whole process of yoga, under whatever heading it may be, is to control the unbridled material senses and thus prepare oneself for self-realization, right? So if the senses are not controlled, then there is no question of jnana. There is no question of knowledge that comes into the system. So first, the senses have to be controlled. That is the first practice, that is taught in the spiritual like education. The first practice is to control the senses. And once the senses are controlled, then we become it's like a vessel. If the vessel has a lot of holes, how much of a water you pour in, it will not stay on. So if we if you want to store the water in the vessel, we have to plug all the holes, right? So in the same way, here the senses, uncontrolled senses, are like the holes, and knowledge is like the water. So the knowledge will not sustain in a person if the senses are not controlled. So the first practice in the spiritual practice is that self-control, right? So in all yoga processes aim at that, to control the senses. So in this age, specifically this Jada Yoga cannot be of any practical value. But on the other hand, the practice of Bhakti Yoga is feasible because it is just suitable for this age. The simple method of hearing from the right source, Srimad Bhagavatam, will lead one to the highest perfectional stage of yoga. And that's what we are trying to do every afternoon. So like here, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning, simply by hearing from the right source, Srimad Bhagavatam will lead one to the highest perfectional stage of yoga. We don't need to wander naked like Rishabhadev, what he did. And that is not possible in this age. Like the process that is recommended in this age is Bhakti Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga means what? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, like, what is that? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dashyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. So these are all the 9 processes of the Bhakti Yoga. And Shravanam, the hearing, and Kirtanam is speaking about the Lord, and Smaranam, to remember the pastimes of the Lord, right? Archanam, offering worship to the Lord. Vandanam, offering prayers, like Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, like to become a servant of the Lord. So these are all the process that is mentioned, for the Kali Yuga. And that's what we have to do. And this is the Bhakti Yoga process, right? So this is what will give us the desired result in the age of Kali. Okay, so Rishabhadev was the son of King Nabi and the grandson of King Agnidhar, and he was the father of King Bharata, after whose name this planet Earth was called Bharatavarsha. Rishabhadev's mother was also known as Meru Devi, although her name is mentioned here as Sudevi. It is sometimes proposed that Sudevi was another wife of King Nabi, but since King Rishabhadev is mentioned elsewhere as a son of Meru Devi, it is clear that Meru Devi and Sudevi are the same person under different names. So this Rishabhadev's pastimes, as it comes in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, there it is very clear. These names are all. And text 11. Satre mamasa bhagavan hayashirshat hayashira shato sakshat sayatnya purushas tapaniya varnaha chandomayo makamayo kila devatatma vacho babuvar usathihi swasatosya nashtaha. Translation: the Lord appeared as the Hayagriva incarnation in a sacrifice performed by me, that is Lord Brahma. So here the whole context is Brahma is speaking to Narada, his son. So that is the context we are in. So the Lord appeared as Hayagriva incarnation in a sacrifice performed by me, that is Brahma. He is the personified sacrifice, and thus the hue of his body is golden. He is the personified Vedas as well, and the super soul of all demigods. When he breathed, all the sweet sound of the Vedic hymns came out of his nostrils. So this Hayagriva is the horse incarnation of the Lord. And there was once there are 2 demons like Madhu and Kaitaba. So I'm sorry. So like these demons, they stole the Vedic knowledge from the intelligence of Lord Brahma. So these demons were operating on much more subtler level. We know that there are 8 elements like earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So like the subtle elements of the matter are mind, intelligence, and things like that. So like these demons, like they could able to work on the platform of intelligence, and they stole off the whole Vedic knowledge from Lord Brahma. And then the Lord appeared as Hayagriva, and then he restored the Vedic knowledge back, right? So that is one instance. Like there are many instances are there. So let's see in purport what is mentioned. The Vedic hymns are generally meant for sacrifice performed by fruitive workers who also want to satisfy the demigods to achieve their fruitive results. but the Lord is a personified sacrifice and personified Vedic hymns. Therefore, one who is directly a devotee of the Lord is a person who has automatically both served the purposes of sacrifice and pleased the demigods. The devotees of the Lord may not perform any sacrifice or may not please the demigods as per the Vedic injunctions, and still the devotees are on a higher level than the fruitive workers or worshippers of different demigods. So, in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we can see that the shloka starts with Sahayagya Pura Vacha. So like Praja Shishtva, like so that the Lord mentions that in the beginning of creation, I created the people in general, then I created the devatas, the demigods, and then I gave the process of the yajna performance. So by performing the yajna, so one offers the sacrifice to the Supreme Lord, and he offers oblations for different devatas, different demigods. And when the demigods are pleased by the Vishnu Prasad, so they will give different kinds of facilities for the people in general. This is a cooperative work. People in general, they perform yajna to please the Supreme Lord and the demigods, and then the demigods in turn give the natural resources for the people in general. So that's how the system is. It's a triangular system that the Lord had made. So but then these yajna performances, these sacrifices are not mandatory for the devotees of the Lord. Because the devotees of the Lord, they are not thinking that I need this, I need that. They are just thinking, how can I please the Supreme Lord? That's all. And when they are trying to please the Supreme Lord, automatically, here we see that the Lord is a personified form of the Vedas. And when the Lord is pleased, automatically all the Vedic hymns are, it is meaning that no one has chanted all the Vedic hymns, and it is meaning that one has performed all the Vedic sacrifices and things like that. Just by chanting the names of the Lord, it is it is equivalent to performing all the various Vedic sacrifices, and even more than that, right? So that is why it is considered to be like the Bhakti Yoga is considered to be foremost, because it is not, in this process we are not asking anything from the Lord. We are just simply trying to satisfy him, right? So that is the highest, this one. If we ask anything from the devatas, and we want to do the karma kandya yajnas and things like that, so then whatever we ask for, that is how much we will get. But then if we try to please the Lord and then say that I am your servant and I just want to simply be engaged in your service, so then there is whole lot of things, everything, we are absolved of all the debts that are there. We had discussed this sloka also. Deva Rishi Bhutatir Vinam Pitrinam, Deva Rishi Bhutatir Vinam Pitrinam Nayam Kinkaro Narinicha Rajan Sarvatmano Yash Sharanam Sharanyam Gato Mukundam Parihritya Kartum. So he says, in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, the sloka comes. It says that Deva, Rishi, Nrinam, Pitra, so many different peoples, we are indebted to. So in one lecture I was hearing that if nice birds are singing, and if we hear those sweet voice of the birds and then appreciate, oh, there is nice chirping of the birds, so then we become indebted to those birds, because we enjoyed something from them. So then we become indebted to that. So in this way, we get sun, moon, rain, and for that we have to be indebted to the devatas. And then the forefathers, they have given us the lineage, and the rishis have given the knowledge. In this way, so many people we are indebted to. So we have to repay to all these people. So but then sarvatmano yash sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihirta kartum. So if we just simply surrender to the Mukunda, the Supreme Lord, so then everything, we are absolved of all the debts that is there in in different capacities, right? So it is very difficult to go and fix all the debts that we have in this world. What all we know, we have taken benefit from. So many benefits we have derived from so many people in this world. We cannot fix all the debts. We can just simply surrender to the Supreme Lord and serve him. Then all the debts are taken care of, right? Okay, next sloka, text 12. Matsya Yuganta Samaye Manunopalabdaha Shani Kshoni Mayo Nikila Jiva Nikaya Ketah Vishram Shithan Urubhaye Shalile Mukan Me Adaya Tatra Vijahara Haveda Margan. At the end of the millennium, the would-be Vaivasavata Manu of the name Satyavrata would see the Lord in the fish incarnation, is the shelter of all kinds of living entities up to those on the earthly planets. Because of my fear of the vast water at the end of the millennium, the Vedas come out of my Brahma's mouth, and the Lord enjoys the vast water and protects the Vedas. Right? So this is the Matsya avatar happens at the end of the millennium when the huge pralaya comes. And then the would-be Vaivasavata Manu. So that is means like the person who's supposed to become the Vaivasavata Manu. So his name is Satyavrata. He will be the he will get to see the Lord as the Matsya incarnation. And what will happen is that Matsya, the small fish, Satyavrata, the king Satyavrata, he will be going to a pond, and then he would be taking bath or something like that. And then the small fish will come in the hand of the king when he is taking a little bit of water from the this one reservoir. And then this fish will speak to him saying that, no, I am a small fish. I'm very afraid of this water body. Please give me protection and things like that. So then he will take the fish in the Kamandalu, and then he will take it to the kingdom. He'll put it on a small tank, and the fish will grow very big. And then he will say like, no, this place is very small. You take me to a bigger place. And then he will put him on a bigger pond. The fish will again grow. And then he will put him on the lake. He will again grow. Then finally he'll get to the ocean. And then the Satyavrata will ask like, no, who are you? Like, no, you are growing like this, so big. So then he'll understand that is the Supreme Lord in the Matsya avatar. And then the Lord will say, very soon there is going to be pralaya, and I am going to protect you. And all the sages and all the important people can board on me, and then board on a boat, and then this Matsya avatar will protect that boat. And the Matsya avatar also will protect the Vedas during this period of time. So that's the story in a purport. During one day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus, and at the end of each Manu, there is a devastation up to the earthly planets, and the vast water is fearful even to Brahma. So, in the beginning of the in the beginning of the would-be Vaivasavata Manu, such devastation would be seen by him. There would be many other incidents also, such as the killing of famous Shankasura, etc. This foretelling is by the past experience of Brahmaji, who knew that in that fearful, devastating scene, the Vedas would come out of his mouth, but the Lord in his fish incarnation not only would save all the living entities, namely the demigods, animals, men, and great sages, but would also save the Vedas. Okay, text 13. Shiro Dadav Amaradhanava Yutapanam Unmattana Unmat sorry Unmatanatam Amrita Labdaye Adidevah Prashtena Kachapa Vapur Vidadhara Gotram Nidakshano Dri Parivrata Kshanana Kanduhu. The primeval Lord then assumed the tortoise incarnation in order to serve as the resting place pivot for the Mandara mountain, which was acting as a churning rod. The demigods and the demons were churning the ocean of milk with the Mandara mountain in order to extract nectar. The mountain moved back and forth, scratching the back of the Lord Tortoise, who, while partially sleeping, was experiencing an itching sensation. Right. So this is the Kachapa Rupa, or the this one tortoise incarnation, or we also call as the Kurma avatar. Right. So so this incarnation happened during the Samudra Manthan, when the churning of the milk ocean was going on. And at the time, the whole Mandara mountain was kept on the back of the Lord Tortoise. And like he was in Yoga Nidra, so partially sleeping, and he was experiencing a nice itching sensation, like nice scratching, of his body. That's the this one of the Kurma avatar. Although it is not in our experience, there is a milk ocean within this universe. Even the modern scientists accept that there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of planets hovering over our heads, and each of them has different kinds of climatic conditions. Srimad Bhagavatam gives much information which may not tally with our present experience. But as far as Indian sages are concerned, knowledge is received from the Vedic literatures, and the authorities accept without any hesitation that we should look through the pages of authentic books of knowledge, Shastra Chakshurvat. That means like seeing through the eyes of the Shastra. So we cannot deny the existence of the ocean of milk as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam unless and until we have experientially seen all the planets hovering in space. Since such an experiment is not possible, naturally we have to accept the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam as it is, because it is so accepted by spiritual leaders like Sridhar Swami, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti, and others. The Vedic process is to follow in the footsteps of great authorities, and that is the only process for knowing that which is beyond our imagination. The primeval Lord, being all powerful, can do whatever he likes, and therefore is assuming the incarnation of a tortoise or a fish for serving a particular purpose is not at all astonishing. Therefore, we should not have any hesitation whatsoever in accepting the statements of the authentic scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam. The gigantic work of churning the milk ocean was the combined effort of the demigods and the demons, required a gigantic resting ground or pivot for the gigantic Mandara hill. Thus, to help the attempt of the demigods, the primeval Lord assumed the incarnation of a gigantic tortoise swimming in the ocean of milk. At the same time, the mountain scratched his backbone as he was partially sleeping, and thus relieved his itching sensation. Right. So that's one. Can we read another one? I think so. We can read one more. Traipishtapuru Bayaha Sanrashimma Rupam Kritva Brahmat Brukuti Damstra Karala Vaktram Daitendramashu Gadaya Bi Patantam Arad Purau Nipatya Vidadhara Nikhaika Spurantam. Okay. The personality of God had assumed the incarnation of Nrsimhadeva in order to vanquish the great fears of the demigods. He killed the king of demons Hiranyakashipu, who challenged the Lord with a club in his hand by placing the demon on his thigh and piercing him with his nails, rolling his eyebrows in anger and showing his fearful teeth and mouth. Purport. The history of Hiranyakashipu and his great devotee son Prahlad Maharaj is narrated in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Hiranyakashipu became very powerful by material achievements and thought himself to be immortal by the grace of Brahmaji. Brahmaji declined to award him the benediction of immortality because he himself is not an immortal being. But Hiranyakashipu derived Brahmaji's benediction in a roundabout way, almost equal to becoming an immortal being. Hiranyakashipu was sure that he would not be killed by any man or demigod or by any kind of known weapon, nor would he die in the day or night. The Lord, however, assumed the incarnation of half man and half lion, which was beyond the imagination of a materialistic demon like Hiranyakashipu. And thus, keeping pace with the benediction of Brahmaji, the Lord killed him. He killed him on his lap, so that he was killed neither on the land nor on the water, nor in the sky. The demon was pierced by the Nrsimha's nails, which were beyond the human weapon imagined by Hiranyakashipu. The literal meaning of Hiranyakashipu is one who is after gold and soft bedding. No, Hiranya means gold and Kashipu means soft bed. No, the ultimate aim of all materialistic men. Such demoniac men who have no relationship with God gradually become puffed up by material acquisition and begin to challenge the authority of Supreme Lord and torture those who are devotees of the Lord. Prahlad Maharaj happened to be the son of Hiranyakashipu, and because the boy was a great devotee, his father tortured him to the best of his ability. In this extreme situation, the Lord assumed the incarnation of Narsimhadeva, and just to finish the enemy of the demigods, the Lord killed Hiranyakashipu in a manner beyond the demon's imagination. Materialistic plans of godless demons are always frustrated by the all-powerful Lord. Right? Okay. Should we read one more? Okay, this is a little longer purport is there, so we will read it tomorrow. Right? So thank you all for joining. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we will meet again tomorrow. Hare Krishna.